Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I know there's people joining us from around the world, so it's 9 a.m. here in Calgary and different times around the world. I believe there's going to be about 50 of our trade commissioner friends joining us today, and we loved looking at the list to see where you're all from. I saw Auckland and Japan, New York and Dubai, Colombia and Belgium, so and lots of other cities I didn't mention because I didn't go through all 60 of you, but thank you for joining us, and good morning from Calgary. My name is Megan Zimmerman. I'm the Director of Business Development with Calgary Economic Development, and I'm joined by a lot of my colleagues who you'll meet here shortly, as well as a couple of special guests. And like you, we really miss the in-person meetings, all the networking activities, and the travel to your cities, but we are grateful for the opportunity to connect virtually on occasions like this until we can gather in person again, and we are certainly looking forward to that. So before we get into sharing more about the Calgary story with you and certainly a spotlight on agribusiness, I'd like to introduce our colleague with Global Affairs Canada here in Calgary, Tracy Deal, just to give us some warm welcome remarks this morning. Tracy.
Thanks, Megan. So again, I want to welcome our trade commissioners on the call from around the world and Invest in Canada colleagues as well. Glad to have you all participate. I know many of you, and many of you are working closely with my team, our 15 trade commissioners at the regional office in Alberta, including our two that are dedicated to agri-food and ag tech, Lauren Hoshka and Sam Boateng. And we are also regularly connecting with you to help you navigate the investment ecosystem in Alberta, as well as on investment aftercare. And I've said this to many of you before, but your investment client is our next export client, so it's really a continuum. I just want to make 3 quick points today. One, there's a strengthening investment ecosystem in Alberta between Invest in Canada, the provincial government, and I hope to have some updates for you in the coming weeks on that, and municipal levels with Calgary Economic Development key among those. Take advantage of this ecosystem. They are your boots on the ground to provide value propositions and market intelligence. Secondly, Alberta and Calgary have an incredible story to tell beyond oil and gas. I came back to this office for a reason. It's a province of problem solvers and innovators, and we meet incredible companies through our office every day on everything from warehousing robotics, state-of-the-art ocular surgery, to traceability technology for the livestock and agri-food supply chains. And finally, I think this is a fantastic initiative on the part of CED, so thank you, Megan and Patrick and your team in bringing the city to our network. But it's also very much a dialogue. So after this session and on an ongoing basis, be vocal. Let us know what you need in terms of tools and information to better equip you and your potential investors on this region. And I'll leave it there. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Tracy. And on that note, I'm going to start sharing my screen with you guys here. Just give me a moment. Patrick, can I get a thumbs up if you can see my PowerPoint?
There you
Excellent.
go.
Great. It's always nice when technology works. So as Tracy said, this is FDI and supporting investor interests is certainly a team sport. And so I wanted to just take a moment to ask my team, and I put up their faces and names and areas of expertise on the screen just to introduce themselves, because we certainly want this to be the start of a conversation, not the end, and an opportunity for you to understand who on our team is here to support you in the various sectors. So Patrick, why don't you take it away and introduce yourself to those that may not have met you before.
Sure. I'm Patrick Madden. I'm the Vice President of Business Development here at Calgary Economic Development. I'm pleased to have joined CED from Government of Alberta about 8 months ago. Have been a long-term practitioner of foreign direct investment, having worked with the federal government at the High Commission in London and the consulate in Boston, and then to the provincial government as well. So we're very keen to work with the community out there. We understand how it is on a ground level and how we try to promote Canada in all its forms, and we're keen to work with you on the Calgary opportunities. Thank you.
Marliese, over to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Marliese Hunter, and I manage our agribusiness portfolio here at Calgary Economic Development. I definitely won't take up too much of your time right now because you'll be hearing plenty from me in the coming minutes. I'm actually ventured back to my hometown in Manitoba right now, so very familiar with the prairies, very familiar with agriculture, and happy to share a little bit of insight into what we're doing here in Calgary in southern Alberta.
Thank you. Amy.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Amy Smith, and I am the Business Development Manager who manages the aerospace and defense sector, along with the transportation logistics sector, which is inclusive of manufacturing and all things autonomous systems and aerial vehicles. So really exciting stuff, and it's a pleasure to be here today and meet you all virtually. I look forward to future conversations with all of you.
Thanks, Amy. Mike.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mike Addersall. I'm the Business Development Manager managing enterprise accounts. My role is cross-sectoral, so I'll be working within the aerospace, logistics, ag, energy, life sciences. My target and goal is to be working with some of the larger familiar names in industry, so anyone from the Facebooks, the Googles, Amazons, big names in banking, you name it, we're looking for those big names in each industry, as well as some of the upcoming players and maybe who's becoming well recognized in their ecosystem.
Thank you, Mike. Linda.
Hi, good morning, everyone, or good evening, wherever you are. My name is Linda Trong, and I support the business development team through inside sales. That includes support on lead generation, and that could be through the Trade Commissioner Service or our other stakeholder networks. Also includes pitch development. Sometimes you may have clients that are looking for tidbits of information about Calgary. I definitely pull that information together using research, data, and marketing. So look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. And you'll see a little note on the bottom of our slide there. We have 2 new business development managers joining us next month. Both portfolios we've had for a while, but new faces that you'll get to meet, one for energy and one for life sciences. So that rounds out the business development manager group, and certainly the people you'll be hearing from following today's webinar. So I'm going to just give you a really quick high-level overview of Calgary and a couple of interesting facts before we get into the agribusiness feature with Marlise and a couple of our guest speakers today. So we know amongst this well-traveled group, you know where Calgary is, but I like to remind people just how connected we are. This city is connected to 140 flight destinations with 80 direct routes to Asia, Europe, and the Americas. And obviously this is very important to investors from a business continuity and ease of travel point of view. We always use the opportunity when we're talking to our friends around the world to brag a little bit about Calgary being ranked the best city to live in North America. These kind of rankings are obviously pure gold for an economic developer, and we are certainly proud to be ranked as such a livable city. And you'll hear a little bit more about the factors that contribute to that shortly. So while you're going to hear a lot about the agribusiness sector today, I just want to highlight a couple of key points about the other sectors the team talked about that they represent today. We'll probably be delving into some of these sectors on future webinars. So if this is of particular interest for your region or certain colleagues on your team, we'll look forward to greeting with you at that point on a future webinar. I wanted to mention that Calgary has the highest concentration of head offices per capita in Canada. That surprises a lot of people. We are at 118 head offices, and certainly a lot of those head offices are in the energy sector, but many of them are in some of the industries that we're talking about here. This slide is a bit of Calgary's calling card right now, and this really is a unique value proposition for our city and our province. We've done the research, and we know that $18.5 billion is forecast to be spent in Alberta over the next couple of years on the digitization of our industrial sectors. This is obviously very attractive to technology companies around the world. This applies to all sectors that you see on the slide, and all of the technology areas, including AI, machine learning, blockchain, Internet of Things, artificial and virtual reality. So we don't consider technology a sector, but certainly an overlay in all of these other sectors you see here. And that's a significant amount of spend in digitization here in Alberta, and really speaks to the concentration of our industrial sectors. So this is probably one of the main points I would ask everyone to try to keep in mind, and is really quite unique in Alberta in the context of the Canadian provinces. So there's a fair bit of information on each of these slides about the sectors. I'm going to just highlight one point per sector, and then you can look at the rest of it when we do the deck as a follow-up. So obviously, we're often asked about what's happening in Alberta's energy sector. The digitization of energy is certainly a really important point. $12 billion will be spent on digitizing our energy sector across Canada, and $4.5 billion of that will be spent right here in Alberta. So that's a huge talking point to what's happening in oil and gas. In addition, and I think a little known fact is that Alberta has some of the best renewable energy resources in the world, including wind, solar, geothermal, and bioenergy resources. And we're also seeing a lot of increased activity in lithium mining, hydrogen development, and a lot of clean technologies. So we're really trying to position Calgary and Alberta as a center of energy, not just a center of oil and gas. Life sciences, very popular sector around the world these days, given the context of the last couple of months. One of the unique value propositions of Alberta and Calgary in the life sciences sector is that Alberta Health Services is Canada's largest province-wide, fully integrated healthcare system, serving 4.3 million patients. What this means for companies is this is a single access point for patient data, and obviously that's an invaluable asset for health technology companies. Calgary is Western Canada's distribution hub and Canada's second largest inland port. We are certainly connected, as you saw from the map earlier, around rail, but Calgary has an extensive multimodal network of air, road, and rail with numerous logistic support services. This is also a growing sector right now, given COVID-19 and the pressures on supply chain and customer demand. Calgary is emerging as a center for R&D and aerospace, as Amy mentioned a little bit. We are certainly a hotbed for testing of autonomous vehicles, and the city has deep technical expertise in GIS systems, building on the strengths of the energy sector. So this is certainly an emerging area for Calgary right now. Calgary is a global financial center, and we are starting to attract international financial players, as evidenced by Morgan Stanley's $1 billion acquisition of Solium Capital in 2019. The company is now called ShareWorks by Morgan Stanley. Just a little slide lag. I'll start, there we go. Oops. So you probably get asked this a lot for any companies looking at opportunities in new markets. It's certainly the top of our list as well, which is talent. So I just wanted to touch on very high level, and we could do an entire presentation on what we're doing around talent development. But what is our three-pronged approach here in Calgary? So the first is retain. That means all of the graduates coming out of the post-secondaries in Alberta find really interesting opportunities to grow and scale their careers here and not having to leave the province. There's a significant focus on work integrated learning opportunities between industry and all of the post-secondaries here in the province. The second one is retrain. As you would imagine, we have a very highly skilled workforce in Alberta coming out of the energy industry, and a lot of those people are underemployed or unemployed. So there's a significant focus on retraining and upskilling those people to future-proof our workforce for the future and really, realign them for the jobs that we see are growing in demand. And the final prong is recruitment. So we certainly are out recruiting young talent from around the world, promoting the high quality of life and diversity of jobs in Calgary, which we'll talk about here in a minute. So when it comes to cost competitiveness, Calgary is very competitive on the commercial real estate side of things. Calgary has the second lowest commercial property taxes of the major Canadian cities. And right now, about 12 million square feet of commercial real estate available downtown. And obviously the pricing for that is very competitive. So that's attractive to companies that are still looking at office space. We know COVID has certainly shifted some companies' mindsets, but Calgary has really, really incredible space available for companies that are looking at expansion into the city. And as I wrap up here, I know there's a lot of information on this tax slide, but obviously something we all get asked by investors. A couple of key takeaways for you is that Alberta's corporate tax rate will be the lowest in Canada by 2022 at 8%. We are the only province with no PST, and we have the 4th lowest total effective tax rate amongst 111 global cities. Like Tracy's beautiful background, we always like to include a picture of the Rockies. Everyone knows Calgary is just over an hour away from the Rocky Mountains. It really contributes to the quality of life and attractiveness of this city and all the recreational opportunities for people that move here. And you can live at a very affordable price in Calgary. So, you know, the slide kind of speaks to itself when you see the house prices compared to some of the other major cities that we often are competing for investment against. So that's the end of the Calgary overview. I'm going to pass it on to Marlise to get into the agribusiness feature that you all came to hear about. And certainly we'll make the SEC available, and anything you want to know in further detail our team can provide. So Marlise, over to you.
Sure. Well, thanks again, everyone, for joining us today to talk a little bit about agriculture. And sorry if you hear a few children in the background. I've got a little bit of a circus here today. I could talk about agriculture in our region all day, so I'll try to keep it short and brief and concise. But if there's any questions you have or any follow-up you need, by all means, reach out to me after the webinar and going forward. So Megan, if you're in control of my slides, if you can just hit the next one. We talk a little bit about, you know, Calgary as a major metropolitan city, but, you know, when you think about agriculture, it's hard to associate the two a little bit, but we talk about, you know, our direct access to a strong agricultural base in Calgary and specifically Southern Alberta. You know, we're a very well-connected region with a lot of cross-collaboration, not just across, you know, our geographic areas, but various agriculture-related industries and research and training institutions as well. And I'll get into that a little bit. We really do have expertise in all things ag. When people think about Calgary and they think about Alberta, they often think about oil and gas, but agriculture was the founding industry across the prairie provinces and in the region that we call home. You know, we're surrounded by primary production, protein development, ag tech innovation, food and safety traceability. And we really are working towards making Calgary and specifically the Southern Alberta region a hot spot for investment attraction, both in primary production and all of the other areas I mentioned. Go ahead, Megan. So just briefly, some of the key reasons of why Calgary, why Southern Alberta, why Alberta in agribusiness, and I'll get into them in a little bit more detail. But I mentioned, you know, our proximity to an agriculture base. We're surrounded on all sides by all things agriculture, really bridging the gap between urban and rural, you know, connection in agriculture. Megan talked about a lot of our key attributes in the city of Calgary, our talent, our financial services, business services, but being that you can drive 20 minutes from downtown Calgary and actually be in a canola field to beta test your products is something that a lot of major jurisdictions just don't have. When it comes to specialized skills and training, because of our deep-rooted history in agriculture, there are a variety of agriculture institutions around the province, specifically again in Southern Alberta, that are educating the next generation of agricultural leaders. So not only do we have that talent that's growing up in rural communities, on the farms, in primary production, that are moving into our urban centers, but we also have specific training institutions that are feeding that talent base. And further to that, we have incredible research capacity. Two major universities, University of Alberta, University of Calgary, and a number of smaller universities and colleges, the University of Lethbridge, Olds College, Lethbridge College, and Lakeland College. But on top of that, there are 55 research institutions, 55 researchers and 15 centers in the province of Alberta alone that specifically work in a research capacity around agriculture-focused initiatives. Specific to agri-food, which kind of gets down value chain a little bit in the discussion around agriculture, we really do have strength in food safety and traceability, not just in the province, but in Canada as well. You know, we have a global reputation, a trusted brand. When you think about Alberta beef, for example, that's highly recognized around the world as being a high quality product. And we're working to build up that reputation among a lot of our primary products, stemming then into ingredient production, so on and so forth. Megan touched on this a little bit, but we are also a major distribution hub, which gives us some logistical advantages as a prairie city. You know, we have the ability to meet or to hit a market of 11 million consumers within one business day of the city of Calgary. So if you think about supply chain logistics and going from, you know, your primary production to your value added products, we really do have the ability to hit a large consumer market in value added products and ingredient products, but also have a major distribution network from our international airport, which is Calgary's 4th busiest airport and one of the busiest for cargo. And then lastly, but certainly not least, there's a growing emergence of a presence of anchor firms here in Calgary. Big players like BASF, you know, Bayer, Syngenta, Nutrien, Safina Foods. I'll go into that again a little bit later, but big multinational companies and the emergence of a number of smaller ag technology companies, agri-food companies, and financial services companies are all based here in the region. So I'll go a little bit further. I should probably speed up a little bit knowing how much time we have left. But again, to touch on the proximity to the agriculture base, land in Alberta, agricultural land in Alberta makes up about 1/3 of the total land mass. Most of that's actually located in southern Alberta. That's over 50 million acres of our province that's covered in farmland and in primary production. And of that, southern Alberta includes about 70% of Canada's total irrigated land. And irrigated land in such a dry province allows a greater variety of crops to be grown. So not just, you know, our traditional grain and oil seed pulse crops, but it also gives us the opportunity to include vegetables and some fruits in that irrigated land as well. And for every $1 of irrigated land or investment in irrigated land, the corresponding GDP is actually $2.5 back, making it even more attractive for growers. And with that, you know, our market share, not just in primary production, but in agri-food, has continued to grow year on year in Alberta, with exports exceeding $11 billion. Like I said, not just in primary production, but in value-added products as well. And the value of that is, again, like I mentioned, how we can, go ahead, Megan, how we can distribute those products. Calgary is Canada's western inland port. You know, we have a $2.4 billion investment into the YYC airport, which gives us significant capacity by air. We're connected by some significant infrastructure in rail and in road as well, giving us, again, like I mentioned, that access to over 11 billion consumers, or 11 million consumers within one day. And this just kind of gives you a little bit of a snapshot of the market access. Like I mentioned, we're Canada's second largest inland port, second only to the Toronto metro region. And we're home to a number of commercial and logistical clusters of over 5,000 transportation logistics business. It's a critical mass of freight transportation and distribution activity that makes Calgary an attractive market for strong investment, particularly in in aspects of the agri-food value chain. And I touched on it again. You know, we have a fairly significant presence of anchor firms due to our location, you know, in the heart of Southern Alberta, which offers, you know, direct access to a major business and financial hub in Calgary, but also the proximity to primary production, proximity to, you know, the actual farmland that organizations are working with farmers directly or beta testing their new products. Like I mentioned, companies like BASF, Cargill, Corteva, Entera, PepsiCo, TELUS, the list goes on and on, in ag tech, in crop science, in food and beverage manufacturing and distribution. To speak to the talent pool in Alberta is something Megan touched on again. We already have, you know, a significant talent pipeline in urban Calgary. 64% of the province at age 25 to 64 have a post-secondary education. A lot of that has been geared towards oil and gas, and with our retraining and upskilling programs, we're seeing a lot of individuals pivot into other industrial sectors that are offering a promising future. In Alberta alone in 2018, you know, over 75,000 people were employed across the value chain in agriculture in the region. And like I mentioned, there's significant agriculture training institutions that help to feed that talent pipeline. I mentioned them a little bit, but some of the key technical colleges, Old College, the University of Lethbridge College, and the University of Calgary, all of which are either in Calgary or within, you know, 2 hours from our city center, are actually feeding specific programs for agriculture, so that whether that's heavy equipment, agricultural studies, Old College just launched the Workland School of Ag Technology along with their Smart Farm, all offering promising research projects specifically to agriculture, again, feeding a pretty sizable agriculture specific talent pipeline in our region. And just recently, actually last week, Creative Destructions Labs, Rockies launched a new CDL Ag Stream designed to help grow seed stage science and technology based companies. So they're one of many accelerators and programs in the region that are helping to grow not just larger agricultural companies, but early stage seed startups. Megan touched on the digital spend a little bit earlier, and agriculture is forecasted based on you know, the report that we undertook to be the fastest growing and fastest adopter of digital transformation here in Alberta, growing to approximately 25% before the end of 2022, which is fairly significant. It's one of the last industrial sectors to really see a significant and sizable shift in the adoption of technology. And Calgary does offer, you know, this hub for precision agriculture and precision technology, with more than 22 facilities in Alberta playing a role in ag tech and ag innovation research. Again, whether that's in livestock, whether that's in primary production, in your crop sciences space, or in the adoption of technology. There's a variety of opportunity, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention what we're doing with Olds College. So Calgary Economic Development and Olds College, which is just an hour north of the city, 45 minutes north of the Calgary airport, is a technical college that has a specific focus on agriculture, technology adoption in agriculture. So we have a unique partnership because there is such a cluster and critical mass of companies and research institutions just in that hour drive alone for all things agriculture. Olds College offers what they're calling the Smart Farm, which is their applied research pillar at the Olds College, but it essentially serves as a beta test site for new technologies. So they have incorporated, sensors, stationary soil monitors, digital weather stations, wireless grain bin sensors, anything that you can think of that could be utilized on the farm or in a farm setting has been integrated, or they're partnering with organizations, companies, both private and public, to test out everything and anything as it relates to ag technology. So it's a great resource to have in the region. It's a great partnership that we have with a specific training institution. Again, not just to feed the talent pipeline, but to actually attract companies to work with them to beta test out new technologies on a farm setting. They have just over 2,000 acres, which is a huge value add to the region. And I'll wrap up just by talking about the regulatory environment a little bit in the region and how it can be beneficial or offer some programs to organizations looking to set up here in the region. There has been significant investment both provincially and federally, and as you know, things are constantly changing in our current environment, but both the province and the federal government have invested in the agribusiness economy in Alberta. There have been 2 supercluster initiatives or programs funded by the Strategic Innovation Fund from a federal government perspective. One of those obviously being the supercluster with the Protein Industries Canada, working with private industry partners to create co-investment projects that have the potential to transform agriculture and agri-food specific to alternative proteins. Of the announcements they've made already in investment projects, 4 companies from Calgary have been selected to participate in some of their PIC-related projects, which is really exciting. There is another program, the Canadian Agri-Food Automation and Intelligent Network, that was just announced last fall, but has just recently started to do calls for proposals for funding. Is a group of technology and agri-food companies, universities, colleges, and research institutions that are working together to create technological solutions for Canada's agriculture industry and serve as, again, almost a beta test network for the advancement of technology and agriculture in Canada, specifically Western Canada. There's also programs through the provincial government, the Canadian Agricultural Partnership Program, which is a collaboration between the federal government, the provincial government, which represents an investment of over $406 million to fund strategic programs and initiatives for the agriculture sector. Some of those are industry specific, some of those are primary production or public initiatives, but all are meant to spur the growth of agriculture and agriculture related partnerships here in Alberta. And then lastly, we talk about the work being done by our new provincial government around red tape reduction. So the province and the government of Alberta are working to cut red tape by 1/3 to reduce the burden of doing business and make it easier to access government services. We've seen some of those come into play specific to certain areas in agriculture, but we anticipate that there will be an ongoing drive to make sure that doing business, doing agricultural related business in the province will become easier and easier. That's all I have for today. I meant to talk about a few recent agricultural expansions. We have a gentleman with us today from BASF. BASF joined us in Calgary last year by moving their agricultural solutions headquarters from Mississauga here to Calgary. Bayer Crop Science, when they merged with Monsanto, also moved their Canadian headquarters to Calgary last year, and a significant investment in Sleeman Breweries was also made by Sapporo Breweries last year as well. So we're continuing to see strategic investment in the province. We're continuing to see that investment here in the city, both big and small, and happy to answer any questions you might have about all things agribusiness.
Awesome. Thank you, Marlise. So you've heard from Marlise and I, and of course, it's our job and our passion to tell you about how awesome Calgary is and the opportunities in agribusiness, but we'd like you to hear it directly from the companies themselves. So I am happy to introduce two gentlemen that are with us today. Brent Collins is the Director of Marketing for North America with canola with BASF. And Chris Shields is the Vice President of Manufacturing with Lovingly Made Ingredients. So both companies that have expanded their operations into Alberta. So why don't we start with you, Brent? By way of introduction, for those that are not as familiar with you and the department within BASF that you run, could you provide a little bit of an introduction? And then Chris, I'll get you to do the same so everyone knows who they're talking to and the context in which your expansions come into Calgary.
Yeah, thanks, Megan. And first of all, thanks for the opportunity to join the Zoom meeting here today. BASF Agricultural Solutions Canada is really the agriculture solutions pillar of BASF. We use science, innovation, and technology to provide both seed and crop protection products to Canadian growers so that they can meet the food supply demands of our society and in a healthy and sustainable fashion. My particular role as the Director of Marketing for our seeds business for North America, one of my primary focuses is to lead the strategic direction of our leading in vigor canola business that we have, both for Canada and the United States. Canola is a huge crop in Canada. It contributes over 26 billion to the Canadian economy. And we have the market leading technology within vigor canola seeds in Canada. So with over 25 years of experience in the Canadian marketplace, I also play an active role in the industry to help the future of seed and trait research, production and marketing of these new technologies for the Canadian industry.
Awesome. Thanks, Brent. Chris.
Hi, guys. Yeah, so I'm Chris Shields. I'm with a company called Lovingly Made Ingredients. We're actually a new company started in and registered in Alberta in February. So we are an arm of the Meatless Farm, which is a global business now, started initially in the UK about 3 years ago. Started trading, selling meat-free products to market, so burgers, ground mince, and sausages. So typically to the UK market for the first 9 months. Launched into Sainsbury's as a retail product there, and we now feature in all the major retailers in the UK and have spread our wings to a global business. And we now sell in, I think the count this week is 21 countries. Almost a country every week, I think, is planned going forward now as COVID restrictions start to ease around the world. Some of the delays we've had are starting to come online. So we decided to set up shop as Lovingly Made Ingredients here in Canada to support that growth by producing and expanding on the ingredient products that we need to meet the aggressive sales strategy that we've got. So fairly young company, aggressive approach, and found that Calgary and Alberta was the right place for us to make this next leap.
Awesome. I just wanted to remind all of our participants from the Trade Commissioner Service, we want this part of the webinar to be interactive. So questions for Chris or Brent or Marlise or I or anyone on the business development team, you're more than welcome to type those into the chat or the Q&A windows there, and we'll be watching that. But I have a few more questions for the gentlemen in the interim. So BASF, as you mentioned, Canada, was formerly headquartered in Mississauga, and Lovingly Made is a subsidiary of a UK company, as you just said, Chris. I would like both of your perspective on really what, provoked you to look at the Alberta and the Calgary region for your expansions for your respective companies, and what were kind of those key factors you were considering when making that decision that landed you here? So Chris, do you want us to take this one first?
Yeah, sure. So actually, I mean, as I mentioned, our aggressive strategy was we needed to support that by providing the ingredients. So what we're finding is most existing suppliers could not keep up with the growth of us. So while we maintain those relationships and build on those, that we needed a security blanket to make the sales that we needed to do. So maybe by chance, but came across a report from the High Commission and Trade Commission in the UK, talking about all things fantastic in Canada. So I took a trip here in August last year, went to the Paulson Special Crop Convention over in Montreal, which was a fantastic networking event for us to meet people in the industry, and was approached by many people across the prairies and government bodies and other organizations to kind of convince us that they were the right places to go. So had a few days of hopping across Canada, which was my first experience of Canada in a whirlwind tour across the prairies, and then landed in Alberta for the last day. And it basically won out on the fact that the prairies themselves as a whole is a great area for the production of yellow pea, which is our primary product in our recipes right now. But there is all the other crops that are grown, so lentils, fava beans, chickpeas, all attracted us to the area. But the question was still, well, there's not a huge difference between Alberta and Saskatchewan there. Saskatchewan's probably the better place for the production. And it really came down to the proximity of those two provinces working together, as well as the Calgary logistics network that we have and the access out to our expansion as we move forward and advance into the APAC regions as well. So Calgary is almost centrally placed for our expansion globally. It's a great network for us to creep into North America as a whole and then across the APAC region.
Awesome. Nice to see our slides that we shared earlier validated. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Brent, can you speak a little bit to the same question around your team with BASF in making that expansion and investment into our region?
Yeah, thanks, Megan. Not unlike Chris's story. I think, as Marlies mentioned, we moved out almost a year ago from Mississauga to Calgary, and in the case of our business, about 80% of our growers are based in the West, and really growers are at the center of everything that we do. So the decision was really based on proximity and wanting to be closer to our customer. So that was certainly the primary catalyst for the move. But when you look at Alberta itself, I think a lot of the stats Marlies quoted already in terms of how many acres of production, the contribution that Alberta makes in terms of the overall, whether it's farmers or ranchers, it's huge. Alberta is probably a higher percentage of the production than what most people would have anticipated. So just proximity to these institutions for learning. So whether it's the U of C, Lethbridge, Olds College, they're very important facilities for us, not only for interacting and collaborative work, but also for attracting young students to come and work for us. So Alberta and the Calgary area, southern Alberta, absolutely rose to the surface for us as being the most attractive.
That's great, Brent. I'm wondering if you could follow on to that answer with a little bit more detail around how your organization's tapped into the research and development capabilities here. Maybe have an example with one of those post-secondaries or another industry partner here in southern Alberta, because that's obviously a very significant part of your business, is that R&D around crop science particularly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I think just about each one of those institutions we are collaborating. Even if you look in southern Alberta with Lethbridge, Lethbridge is a huge area for us from a seed production perspective. So having access to institutions close by, Olds College, I think on the digital front, incredibly vital to us as a collaborating partner. So I think that the potential right across Saskatchewan. There's offerings in Saskatoon. But I think when you look at one area that stuck out, within a 2-hour driving radius of Calgary, there's a mine full of opportunities for collaboration.
Thank you. I'm just looking at a question that just came in from Monica. Monica, I'd love to know where you are placed right now. Maybe you could add that to the question. The question is for both of you. Thanking you for the presentations. Any considerations that led BASF or Lovingly Made to choose Calgary versus Edmonton? And that is a great question because we get asked that a lot in the Economic Development Agency. So either of you have thoughts on how you chose Calgary within the province?
Yeah, I can maybe start. I think there was for BASF, it was really a trifecta, I think, of reasons. It's a long-standing agricultural presence in the Calgary area, talent pool, second to none. And I think the airport Chris referenced earlier, that just the proximity, you're a direct flight to Frankfurt, you're a direct flight to the West Coast, the East Coast, the Midwest, the airport and the logistics. It certainly was kind of the final decision-making element for us.
Great, thanks, Brent. Chris, anything you'd want to add, or does that cover it for you as well?
Yeah, I think the airport was a big factor because we have to look at as a global business how quickly we can get people in and out of locations that make it suitable. And the other final factor was building space. So in order to execute quickly and as aggressively if we wanted to do, it was actually the vast wealth of distribution warehousing here that was available for lease and purchase that gave us the unique size of building that we needed for our facility.
Great. Thanks for that question, Monica, from Sao Paulo, Brazil. It's awesome. Great. A question for either of you. We touched on it in our presentation, both Marlise and I, but talent is highly important for the growth of any business. Can you speak to, I know, Chris, it's new or very early days for you, so maybe you haven't explored it as much as Brent has, but the talent pipeline here, the ability to access the right skill sets, and your strategy around building the team and your impressions of doing that in the Calgary region so far would be valuable, I think, for future investors and our trade commissioners to understand within the sector.
Yeah, happy to cover that. Actually, so far I have a team of 3, and we have one engineering manager, and really that's kind of the key part to the start of the business is good access to engineering. And this was one of the other good reasons for Calgary. Typically, from at least what I've seen as a newcomer to the area, is engineering's always been well invested in Calgary, most likely for oil and gas. And as that industry seems to be hurting a little bit, it's given a wealth of talent that we can tap into and retrain into food industry. So I don't expect any issue from an engineering point of view, which typically in the region I'm from in the UK has been a challenge to get engineering talent through into that sector. And then food development as well. So you have SAIT and even Nate up in Edmonton and the Leduc Food Centre, that there's enough food talent around, and it's now just how do we make that pull through to make sure we've got good product development going forward. Great,
thank you. Brent, any thoughts on building the team and getting the right talent in Alberta?
Yeah, I think the institutions come to mind immediately, but one thing that we've actually certainly benefited from as well is actually hiring former oil and gas professionals. There's a lot of functions within our organization that go across industries or sectors. So certainly we've absolutely benefited in the last 12 months from that opportunity. When you look at the significant number of colleagues moved across Canada from the Mississauga area to Calgary, and Calgary it's kind of two things for us. It was the ability to attract top talent, but it's also the ability to retain those talented individuals. And I think that the playground that sits in the backyard with the mountains really assists on that retention part.
Awesome. Edmund, hi in Texas. We have a question. I think this question might be geared towards more the CED team. Do we have a wish list of companies headquartered in Texas we'd like to be talking to about Alberta? We always have a wish list, Edmund, and we always can provide a top target list to you. I don't know if your question, you had a specific ask for Brent or Chris around, you know, companies. I guess maybe that I could expand on this a little bit. Companies like, especially BASF, you're always looking for opportunities probably to collaborate in the value chain. Are there any key companies that are not in Alberta right now that, you know, would be an asset for you if they were to be here? I mean, Texas or other global regions. You know, that's always something we think about, is if one company comes, who else may follow? So I don't know if that's anything, Brent, that you guys, you know, have articulated, and fine if not, but you know, it's an opportunity to grow the sector that way, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost infectious, even on the seed and crop protection sector. It just seemed that one or two companies set up shop in Calgary, and then all of a sudden you have critical mass, and there's almost an affinity then for the other companies to come. So absolutely, whether it's grain traders or other members of the value chain, you know, the opportunity to create a center of excellence in Calgary would be fantastic. And I wouldn't be surprised if we start to go in that direction once the other members of the value chain acknowledge just exactly who has set shop up in Calgary.
Right. We got some other questions, and I love that everyone's putting where they're from, because that makes it more fun for me. So Aaron in New York has asked, were there any financial incentives or additional cost advantages that complemented each of your considerations to set up in Calgary? That's the first. I'll pause there because it's a two-part question.
Yeah, maybe I'll comment from BASF's perspective. Certainly there were opportunities to capitalize on those type of incentives. We ended up constructing a brand new office in southeast part of the city, and in an area called Quarry Park, which is almost like a small university setting in Calgary. And I think those type of developers within the city of Calgary are also very interested in attracting new companies. So those type of incentives absolutely exist here in the city.
Thank you. Chris, anything from you on that side?
Yeah, I mean, one of the key ones was maybe not totally specific to Calgary, was just the advanced amortization of equipment for us that we can do. We are looking at further incentives still at the moment, and just working through with Marlies on how we can tap into some of them. There's such a wealth of opportunities, just digging through to find the one that's applicable for us.
Awesome. Marlisa, I think this question is best suited towards you. Also from Aaron in New York. He wanted to ask about vertical farming in Calgary and any specific advantages to that business in our region.
I can certainly provide a little bit more information offline, but I think Chris touched on it a little bit. You know, the availability of warehousing and the distribution networks here in Calgary has provided an opportunity for vertical farming. I think in the particular environment that we're experiencing today with COVID, there's a much larger discussion around the security of the supply chain and producing local and nationalization to a certain degree. So we certainly have the space, we have the technological capabilities. There are a few companies here in Calgary that are homegrown in the technology side of vertical farming and aquaponics. But there's also a number of organizations that are moving here as well to set up large scale vertical farming operations, because again, like we talked about, the ability to meet 11 million consumers in one day is not insignificant, but also that there's a variety of irrigated land and opportunity that can build up that vertical farming space. So happy to speak to that a little bit more offline for anyone who wants to know.
We'll get back to you with more details, Aaron, in New York. Similar questions come in from both Japan and London. for both Brent and Chris around who was the closest international competitor for your investments. I know you both talked about Saskatchewan within the Canadian context. Can you speak to, what other jurisdictions or cities that were in the running when you made your decision to come into the Calgary region and the factors around that?
Sure. I'll take that one first if you want, Brent. We looked at initially whether we sit the facility directly where we operate in the UK. It makes more sense from a senior management point of view and access to people. But we really won out on Canada due to the access. As Brent said, it's being close to those institutions and close to the growers that we can vertically integrate into our supply chain and support that. And being closer to the development and get the consistency there is much better than shipping material across the ocean in the first stage. But we're also, and still are, considering other opportunities around the world. As we're a global business, this will be our center of excellence, and then it's looking at those other areas. So the big standout ones for us right now is somewhere like Singapore or Malaysia for an Asian hub, and then somewhere in Europe, Amsterdam or potentially Eastern Europe for another facility.
Awesome. Brent, any considerations for you?
Yeah, from our decision was really more of a domestic decision where the office would be. So we had the opportunity of staying in the Toronto area, but for the reasons that I mentioned, wanting to be closer to the customer, pushed us out west. So it would have been Winnipeg, Saskatoon, and Calgary. And of those three cities, for the reasons that I've mentioned, Calgary was the standout.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions from our international offices. Maybe just as we conclude here, because we're almost at the top of the hour. Oh, wait, I see one more question coming in. Just want to make sure we get. Edmund, I see you're asking a question about plant-based biomass and a plan for Calgary and Alberta to leverage this into a bioenergy project. That certainly crosses over between Marliese in the agribusiness sector and obviously in energy. Might be something we can do as a follow-up, probably more context that we can provide outside of the minute we have left. Marliese, unless there's anything you want to add just about feedstock for biomass, given that a lot of that is within ag.
There's probably a little bit too much to unpack.
It's a good question. It's a big one we can follow up with you on for sure.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah. So I want to maybe just give the last words to Brent and Chris. Is there any, I know you've given some really good examples of the decision-making your company's made, and I know that's really helpful for the trade commissions when they're thinking about potential companies that might look something like yourselves from their regions. Any words of advice for future investors, from any corner of the globe that is looking at the agribusiness sector and Alberta, things that you made, lessons learned that you'd like to share with others, or words of wisdom you want to impart for companies that will follow in your footsteps with our team effort here?
Yeah, maybe I'll just start, Chris. I think when you think of Calgary, Southern Alberta, it's a great place to live. It's a great place to work, and it's a heck of a fun place to play. So those things you have to think from the personal side as well, not just from the business, but those three things come right up to the top as well. Those things are very important. From an agricultural perspective, in this part of the world, we have wonderful soil, an abundant amount of fresh water, which actually impacts and plays a huge role in our seed production in Southern Alberta. So it's just a gamut of reasons why this part of the world is a wonderful place to set up shop. And and there's one other point that I didn't reference earlier, and that is that we have the best hockey team in the National Hockey League that's also based in this city in the Calgary Flames, and that should also be part of the decision-making process.
You could have worn your jersey, Brent.
Yes, yeah. So thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you. Chris, any pearls of wisdom you'd like to impart?
Yeah, no, I think that was great comments by Brent, and I already have my Calgary Flames jersey as well, so I'm blending in already. And yeah, I think the Rockies make and the proximity to what you've got as an outdoor life and a family. It's as you raised, it's a great place to be. they're kind of the under bubbling pieces that everyone needs to feel well supported and be happy. So that makes a big impact on personal, professional life. And then I think probably the only bit that we talked about, the access to good raw material, and Canada's always been well known as a fantastic exporter of raw product and as a primary producer. But I think there's really an untapped resource, or really the starting of tapping that I would expect in the next few years to be an influx of investment into the area to see protein production, value added. We are only one small player so far, planning to be pretty big for producing our products. But as we come and look to do more, and if we do manufacturing here, which is still on the table for us to do, that ecosystem, like you said, it's the attraction of other businesses that this could become a hub for a different sector, as well as what has been predominantly oil and gas in the past.
That's a great point to end on, Chris. Thank you. And certainly I'd say one of the key messages we're always trying to impart, because outside of Calgary, people just don't see that diversification happening. And this has been a really great showcase of what's happening in agribusiness. So I want to thank all of our participants from all corners of the globe. Really great to have you as part of this. You will be getting the slide deck. We'll be sending a short survey to get your feedback and also understand the sectors of interest for us to do for the next webinar. And on behalf of my colleagues on the business development team and all of Calgary Economic Development, this is FDI and supporting investor interest in our region is certainly a team effort. So our team and Tracy and her colleagues look forward to supporting you. And there's lots of individual questions I've seen here that we will be following up. And you've seen the faces and the names of the people on our team, and we look forward to working with you and meeting you in person when the time comes. So thank you all for your participation and support today. We appreciate it. Bye from Calgary.